Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. There's a morbid joke, you won't get out of life alive. In a lot of respects it's true. There's one thing that we have to do above and beyond everything else, and it does involve death. But along with that, we all are going to leave people behind. We're all going to leave someone who loves us, someone who cared about us behind, and they're going to need to take care of what we left. The things that we left behind, the accounts, the bills, and hopefully that we left some money or property to help compensate this person, to help show them, or some other things to help show them how much we really did care about them. So we need to think about these things ahead of time, as we don't actually really want to think about it, but we do have to think about it. My next guest, she is the owner and founder of Anora Burial, Cremation, and Events. And Laurie's going to talk to us about how we should take care of these final things that we really just don't want to talk about. So let's listen to what she has to say. Welcome back, everyone. I'm here today with Laurie Hurtubise, and she provides a practical and heartfelt care in the journey of life and death. She is a licensed funeral director who will share her guiding light during your dark days. She is passionate about empowering people to plan for the inevitable. Of course, the joke here is the inevitable is, you probably heard this a few times on this station about we're not going to get out of life alive. And alive and Laurie founded Anora Cremetion, Burial, and Events in 2019 because she wanted to give quality, personalized service at a fair price. She believes in supporting local artisans and carpenters whenever possible, giving people all the options, including sustainable options such as green burial. It's important to her. Prior to funeral service, Laurie was an event coordinator, so she's helpful in traditional and unique life-honoring events. Anora services is in the lower mainland of BC, where she also lives and networks with the community to really help promote good service to people. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning.
Yeah. So, there's a story behind why you started Anora. Why don't we start there? What inspired you?
Well, it started out when I was home with my kids when they were little. I took some time off from being an event coordinator to be home with my children. And there was a death in our family, and I started really thinking about death as sort of the ultimate event, and I kept reflecting on it. Back then, you couldn't, search up and find as much information as you do today. So a local funeral provider was very gracious and let me shadow one of their staff members for 2 weeks because I wanted to get an idea if, wrap my head around if this is something that I would want to move forward with. So I did when my youngest started grade 1. I started working full time at the funeral home and started my apprenticeship, which is a 2-year commitment apprenticeship, and it's just went from there.
Yeah, it's was one of those things that you don't think about, but when you really do think about it, that being a funeral director, I guess there would have to be some sort of licensing behind it. Um, with that, I assume that you do like all the preparation of our loved ones' remains and everything to make sure that it's presentable for the celebrations of life and all the events and everything.
Yeah, so the way it works is funeral service is provincial. So every province has a different set of laws that they need to follow. So therefore, the education and licensing is provincial. So I am licensed by the province of BC as a funeral director and as an embalmer. I do both. I do currently have staff members, colleagues who do also assist with the caring of a deceased to make them presentable for events.
So what now we I'm going to be honest with everybody listening. We met through a networking event, and um, Laurie, you had said some things that really like grabbed a hold of my ear and about being prepared for the end, not expecting your loved ones to just take up and everything's just going to be taken care of just because you bought a burial plot or that you made some sort of prearranged commitment with the funeral home like yourself, Anora, to for cremation or how the body is just something to be expedited. You said there's more to it than just that.
Um, well, what I see daily, I see a few misconceptions. So, what I see a lot is where families maybe have purchased plots at a cemetery. So, there's two different things. There's if you're planning on burial or interring cremated remains, for that matter, you want cemetery. You'll want and need cemetery property. So that is sort of one thing to check off the list. But then the other thing is prearranging the funeral services itself. They're two different things. So often people will maybe purchase that plot and then they tell their kids or executor or whoever, oh yeah, it's taken care of, don't worry, I bought a plot, it's all good. Well, that's awesome that they bought a plot and they're prepared for that, but often they haven't done the funeral services side of things for prearranging. So I see that quite a bit where people don't understand between the two.
Yeah.
So
So can you how to put this? Can you prepay for your service or prearrange
yes,
it?
yeah, absolutely. So in BC, so the way it works is you can prearrange with a funeral provider such as ourselves, and either the monies are put into trust or the monies are put in with a life insurance company, essentially. What we do at Anora is all monies are safely with Assurant Life of Canada. They've been around for years. So you're essentially you're dealing with a price freeze when it comes to professional fees and merchandise. So you're paying today's prices, and hopefully you're not going to need our services for quite some time. There's nothing we can do for a price freeze for third-party things like flowers or catering. That's going to vary down the road, but we can certainly put funds aside for you towards that, and we can talk about it and plan it. What I like to do is not just do the basics of putting the funds aside and talking about the basics. I like to get into more specific things like musical choices, like, your favorite poem or psalm, or, oh, you're going to be, if someone's going to be buried, well, let's talk about an epitaph that would be, a good reflection of you. Or some people who are really bold and really accepting of the mortality will go as far as to write their obituary. Maybe not the whole thing, but they might write points to make it easier for their loved ones. So, there's a lot of details that you can do ahead of time, which is a huge gift for your executor and the people that you love.
Yeah. So, um, I guess the next part is because a friend of mine passed away. It was an accident. She slipped. She fell in her bathroom, and
Oh, that's
she lived alone. And when she went to try to get back out of the bathroom again, she fell in a way that she just closed the door shut, and she couldn't scream or anything for help. Okay. Um, I was the executor of the estate, and just because I had that paper that said I was executor, there were still some freezes, like with banks and accounts and stuff like that were like really out there. But she didn't have any money set aside for the funeral, and I kind of ran into the wall because I didn't have any money to pay for it either. So.
right.
What does a person do in that particular situation if they have no money in the bank account because she was an entrepreneur like us? It's like, so what do you do?
Well, it depends. So if someone dies and they don't have funds, like there's truly just no money there at all, then the can apply to the ministry burial program. And so we're blessed in our society that we care for the vulnerable. So therefore, if if you can prove, like the ministry does their research and it needs to see the accounts and that sort of thing. But if it's if you can prove that there's indeed no funds, then the ministry burial program will then pay for the cremation or the burial. They do it simply, but it's still done respectfully and with dignity, which I think says a lot about our society. Unfortunately, there are times that can be challenging because maybe there's money in the state, but it's not liquid. So that can be a little bit more of a challenge where the executor needs to might have to put money out, waiting till funds become liquid. So that can be quite stressful when people don't plan ahead.
Well, planning ahead, is there an age where we should start planning ahead?
Well, at younger and younger these days. I think, quite frankly, since COVID, I think it got a lot of younger people really thinking about mortality and what they would want. And, typically the people that come and prearrange with me are people who are maybe at that point in their life where they're either maybe nearing retirement or have just retired and they're wanting to get all those ducks in a row. Maybe they're downsizing and or sometimes it's much later. I would recommend doing that, more in your sort of early 60s. It makes good sense financially. But some people wait till later, but I think the sooner the better. Case in point with your friend who was quite young who died.
Yeah. She was in her 50s,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
according to the latest WHO standards on we're in our 50s, we're still youthful, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. I hear you.
yeah. So yeah, but you're saying somewhere just start more or less.
Well,
Or
yeah,
as you
because
come out from retirement, start.
yeah, think about it. We get life insurance younger.
Mm-hmm.
We start planning for our retirement younger.
Mm-hmm.
That should be going in. We get our wills done. Those of us that are on the ball, get their wills done way younger. So to me, that just goes hand in hand with all of those things.
Yeah.
Having, someone have power of attorney for you, have your will, it all just connects together.
Yeah. Now, there was another set of issues. Maybe you can explain this to people, because I just kind of got hit with it with my friend because I was named executor, but
Hmm.
maybe you can explain what that actually means a little bit better, to people because it's a responsibility, right?
Oh yeah, it's a huge responsibility. In fact, I have in front of me, um, from a colleague of mine who's an estate lawyer, um, just a point by point of what an executor's duties are, and it's 12 pages long. Um, it just, it's, there's a lot that people do not realize of how much they need to do. I mean, there's so much that people don't realize. So here's an example of one thing: changing the locks on the doors of their homes, um, calling the insurance company, the house insurance company, to let them know the person's died because all policies are different, and it could be that the policy is no longer in effect if the person's died, and you may need to get a policy for the short term. I mean, there's all kinds of things like that. So it's a good idea to get some guidance from a lawyer if you're dealing with a big estate.
Right. Is there
Hmm.
anything that we can do while we're still living to help make that job a little bit easier for?
Oh, there's all kinds of different things. For example, a colleague of mine, Tina again, she's got an app that you put all the information so it's easily accessible for your executor or power of attorney in case of an emergency, in case of not just death, but fire. You've got to flee your home, so um, to have all that information. So some people will do it in this app, which is brilliant, and others will do it in a binder. Um, in a place where people know where it is. There's no point in having a binder if your executor or power of attorney have no idea where it is. A lot of people like to just put it on top of the fridge because also it's an easy grab and go situation in an emergency. And so creating a binder that has, passwords, um, information, different bank accounts. I mean, there's so many bank accounts out there that people don't know exist, and so it, ends up the money's just forgotten and gone.
Yeah.
So putting all that information into a binder is really the way to go.
Now you said passwords.
Hmm.
So here is a interesting bit. When my friend died, she has an iPhone.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't have the password to the iPhone to get
Hmm.
into her contact information to contact some of the appropriate people that needed to be contacted. Right?
Yes.
Apple will not open that phone. No matter
Yeah.
what you do, they will not open that
No.
phone.
No.
So if the passwords are listed in the binder, it makes life a lot easier for people, right?
Yeah. I mean, you obviously want to be careful that all your passwords aren't like just sitting out. I mean, you may have the passwords. You might have a plan where they're maybe tucked away a little bit better, or in the passwords may be in the safety deposit box. So there's
Hmm.
I don't recommend putting a will in a safety deposit box because it's sort of a catch-22. But putting the passwords in a safety deposit box, well, that's a smart thing.
Yeah. Life experience on that one. If the will's in the safety deposit box, the bank manager may not let you take it out.
Yeah. Well, if you don't
Yeah.
have a if you don't have a death certificate, you can't get into the safety deposit box. And if you don't have the will showing your executor, then the funeral director can't help you in getting a death certificate. So that's what I mean by catch-22.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
actually ran into that problem. So
Mhm.
that's why. Yes. I do remember that.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but if it had been the bank manager said that there was like a slip of paper that had it was a note about something that would help me close out an account for something, right?
Oh,
That
yeah.
little scrap of paper I was allowed to take out, but he wouldn't let me
Oh.
take the will out.
Oh.
So
Well, the
that's
other smart thing is to, register the will through Victoria, right?
hmm
So it's registered provincially, and you can also possibly, possibly have it with your lawyer. I actually just gave copies directly to my executors. My brothers have copies of my will, so they don't
yeah.
have to look for it. They've got it.
Oh, there you go. So let's because part of your business name it says events. So um, the the event itself, how the body's interred and things like that, right? Um, how do you guide people through that?
Guide
do,
people through the event itself or through the whole process.
well, guide them through the event. Like if you say you want to be cremated, do you need to actually set aside a casket? Can you pick out the urn ahead of time? That sort of stuff.
Okay. So just to clarify, walk someone through the process to pre-plan their
hmm
event?
Yeah,
Okay,
pre-plan. Yes,
pre-plan.
please.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just want to be clear. Yeah, so, we chat for a while, to see. I mean, some people know right away. They'll come and see me and just say they'll know they want cremation or burial, or maybe they're going back and forth, and we talk about the pros and cons and who's going to be left behind and their values and are other family members buried and all kinds of considerations. So once they ultimately, and the other big thing is, it's a good idea to talk to your family. Often people might come and make a decision and say, yeah, I want, this. I want, a lot of, someone might be like, cremation, yeah, no viewing. Oh, okay, well, I mean, if they're adamantly opposed to being viewed, then of course we need to respect that. But if they're open to the idea, but they haven't asked their family, I'm like, well, you should really ask your family. They're the ones who are going to be left behind. So um, sometimes people make a decision pre-arranging, but they don't talk to their families. So then the family's kind of torn because maybe they do want to see their loved one, or maybe they do want to have an event. So I walk them through the process of their options, and I also remind them that the funeral is not only for the dead, it's for the living. Think about their community as well as themselves, what's ideal. A big thing that I like to talk about to plant the seed early on is because the cremation rate's so high in BC, and so that can be a relatively easy decision for people. Like, yeah, okay, you want cremation, great. What are we going to do with your cremated remains? Well, a lot of people get stumped then. And if people don't make a decision, then it just ends up being huge stress on their loved ones, executor, what have you. Because there's, people then will often not make a decision, and they end up sitting and sitting. There's a lot of cremated remains sitting in a lot of people's homes, not because that was the chosen plan, but because there was no plan made. So that's a big one I like to talk about and put into a prearrangement is what to do with those cremated remains.
So okay, cremated remains. Now I have this lofty idea that I want my ashes spread over, say, the Grand Canyon.
Okay.
Um, is that really possible? I mean,
Um,
legally, regulations and all that sort of stuff.
um, Forgive me, I don't know all the regulations in each state. I can speak to the regulations in our province. Um, so in BC, the simplest way to explain it is that if you want to scatter cremated remains, you need the permission of the landowner. So, so legally, Um, I mean, technically, you cannot scatter on Crown land because you're not getting the permission of the landowner, but really people do it all the time. Um, I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying the way it is and what the law is. My thing is when people are considering scattering on a special place, at a special place, like a family cabin, um, my recommendation is not to scatter at the family cabin. My recommendation is to perhaps bury them so that they are retrievable. Because what if the next generation has to sell that cabin? And they're already going to feel lousy enough that they need to sell that cabin. And now, on top of it, so and so who they love, their cremated remains were scattered there, and they're going to feel even worse. So I strongly recommend that if you want to have cremated remains at a special place like the family cabin, that you inter them, that you bury them in something that's metal or what have you, something that's not going to biodegrade, and so it's retrievable. And then, sorry, to clarify the other thing about what's allowed, so then scattering on water, you can scatter on water as long as it's not going to be drinking water. So you can scatter on the ocean, that's no problem.
Okay. Cool. One part of your answer leads me to, of course, different types of, because there's different types of green burials, right? There's not just one particular brand of it. There's a few different types, right?
Um, well, I mean, to be truly a green burial, you need to follow the pillars of the Green Burial Society. I mean, in essence, a green burial means someone is unembalmed. They are in a biodegradable casket or shroud, and or their clothing is all biodegradable, and they are going directly into the earth, so no vault, no cement vault. And the idea too is to have the land go back to its natural setting. So there won't be a marker directly on that grave. There may be a group marker in that little meadow or section. There's there's cemeteries out there that maybe are doing sort of a shade of green is kind of what I might say, where they're doing their best within a cemetery that's maybe existed for a number of years already, and they're maybe trying to change their bylaws to allow to make it a little bit more sustainable. But maybe it's not 100% all of those things that I just mentioned. But they're doing their best to make some adjustments to be more sustainable.
I see. Because you see some of that on television now, where they talk about this green burial thing, and that they had somebody dig the appropriate size hole, and then on top of that they planted a tree, and it was, and they said this is the green burial thing or whatever on how they describe it on TV. And usually what they say on TV is usually not reality, right?
Well, there's definitely different things. So in Salt Spring Island, they've got a natural burial cemetery. And I mean, one of the reasons why they created it is they wanted to ensure that the Douglas fir forest was never destroyed. And one of the ways to do that was to turn it into a natural burial cemetery. So it's sort of a win-win, shall we say, that the land is going to be preserved because the decedents are buried there. And then the family gets what it is that they're looking for, which is they can go spend time at this beautiful forest.
Wow. I mean, I've pointed out some pretty lofty ideas out there, but that's really grounded and really sounds really beautiful.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Heritage Memorial Gardens in South Surrey
mhm.
is a relatively new cemetery. I think they're one of the. I don't know if they're the only one in Canada. Don't quote me. That, but they've got the. They're referred to as a sustainable cemetery.
Hmm.
So they have um, they have sections that are what I would refer to as a modern cemetery, where there's embalming allowed and so forth. But then they have a section that is green burial.
Yeah.
Um, so I suppose that might be what you're referring to, where different versions of green. So
Yeah.
compared to Salt Spring, they're doing it a little different. I mean, they're in what I would refer to as a sort of a traditional cemetery, but then they've got the green section. Um, that green section does have lawn
Hmm.
that's going to be mowed, right? So there's that, that factor as far as environmental implications compared to, say, Salt Spring. That's, it's just all natural forest. But again, in the big scheme, I mean, I look at Heritage and they're doing all these proactive things. They've got bees that you can actually um, memorialize your loved one with. There's different packages you can do as a mean to memorialize, which I think is brilliant. They also, I mean, the cemetery used to be on farmland, so they still own parcels of land that aren't the cemetery, that they're growing food and giving back to the community, the food bank, I think.
Hmm.
So, I mean, they're definitely still doing, they're they're looking at it, the green burial, they're doing it to the best of their ability, and they're getting creative with it.
Yeah.
We even have city-owned cemeteries now that are doing that sort of thing. So, Chilliwack Cemetery, they've got a green burial section. And right now in Coquitlam, Robinson Memorial, so they're putting a green burial section in. And I don't know all the details right now, but I think there's going to be sort of, again, shades of green in there. Quite frankly, one of the challenges that I see with green burial for people's sort of mindset and what we're used to is the idea that um, often couples want to be buried together, often side by side. With green burial, you're using up a section as they go. Um, so maybe, like maybe Mr. Smith died first, and so he's in this meadow, and then that meadow got filled up because that's how it, with green burial, you want to have that go back to a beautiful green space. And then maybe Mrs. Smith dies 10 years later and she's over in this other meadow because that was the meadow that they were using at the time. So that psychologically, I think, is a challenge for some people with some couples. And so I think that's one of the things we need to look at. So then there's different ways of looking at it, like having a plot that's more of a family plot. So after X amount of years, then it can be reused, which I think is wonderful.
Right.
So again, it's another shade of that green, right? Because it means we're still, um, uh, we're going back to that land, and but we're reusing it. But it's not going to be. It's a different concept than the original one that I mentioned, where it's just letting that go back to the
Right.
beautiful green space.
Right.
But there's pros and cons to both. I mean, gosh, we're moving forward and trying to do positive things. So there's going to be some variables at Robinson Memorial, but I think it's a lot better than, or it gives people options. I mean, should be something for everyone. Your death should reflect your life.
Right. Yeah. Because some people like you said the you mentioned a vault, and from my understanding, the vault is like concrete walls inserted into the ground so that um, it
Yeah, so the
the
reason
earth
why
doesn't
there's
go
vaults,
wonky or something like that, right?
yeah, so the way it works is there's the vault, so it's got the four sides
Mm-hmm.
around the casket,
Mm-hmm.
and then they put the lid on the vault, and so that way the lawn isn't going to sink in.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at, say, like a local cemetery, like city-owned Fraser Cemetery, well, that cemetery you don't have to use a vault. So you will see where all of a sudden, as things happen, decomposition happens, and time goes by, then the grounds crew do need to go, and they need to fill in and do that kind of maintenance.
Right.
So it's doable. They do it. It creates more work for them, and it just means you're not going to have that perfect lawn that you might see elsewhere, where there's cement vaults
Right.
that are in every plot.
Yeah. Um, Now, since we've brought up the topic of traditional versus green and all that sort of stuff, preparing of the body, what where does embalming absolutely necessary, and when can we like maybe not want to use it?
Well, the thing is, it's a very personal choice.
Mm-hmm.
Embalming is definitely necessary for situations, for a delayed viewing. If you're repatriating someone, they need to get on a flight,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. The reality is that, 150 years ago, we started embalming in North America, and so now we're so used to either seeing an embalmed body or not seeing a body at all, where people are now just cremation with no visitation. So, a couple generations ago, we were laying out our own dead. Your neighbors in the community were coming and helping you, and your loved one was laid out in the front living room, and people just came to say goodbye, and that was normal. Death was part of life. Children were not hidden from it. It was just, the way it was. And so the reality is, we can have a visitation with an unembalmed person. They could be bathed and dressed, as long as the family understands what that means, the changes that could occur, the reality that there could be some discoloration on the face, there could be, the natural changes that are going to occur. So it really depends on what the family is willing to accept, the reality of the situation.
Right. That makes a whole lot of sense. So, which leads me to this one really huge question. Um, Anora, do you have at Anora? Do you have like a process that you walk the whole entire family through, so they understand the ins and outs, the ups and downs, and what they're going to see and not see?
Okay, so if I were to, so I just want to clarify. So if I was serving a family that was
Mhm.
considering viewing without embalming, is that what you mean?
With or without,
Or just,
they
yeah.
make this informed choice of, do I want to do this with?
Some people will ask, if we don't embalm, what's the worst case scenario? Let's say, so it really depends on where they're coming from. So, I, I would say every arrangement that I make with each family is always unique, because there's always different questions that come up. But I do my best to empower people. We just want to empower people so they can make an informed decision for them, so what's right for them.
Right. Okay. So, what's the best ways to you, find Anora, and work with you?
Our website is anoralife.com. So Anora, Anora, life, life.com. So if you go on our website, our phone number and email and all that good stuff is there. If you want to follow us on Facebook, you can do that as well. Just to share, Anora, actually, we came up with that name because Anora means honor. And so for us, honoring the journey of life and death, and honoring where people are coming from, because there's so many variables there.
Awesome. So, thank you for your time today.
Mm-hmm.
It's been really informative. It's just an out there topic, but it's a necessary topic. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people will avoid it. They'll talk about anything but. Thank you so much for putting it out there, for having people get informed, get empowered. So the next step is to talk to each other, talk to your loved ones, talk to your best friend. Start talking about what you want, what you don't want. If you want to start with what you don't want and process of elimination, then so be it. But ultimately, we just want everyone to have a death positive conversation. It's so healthy.
Right. All right. Thank you again, and thank you everybody for listening today. And go to anoralife.com, and you'll find Laurie over there. Right.
Thanks so much.
Cremetion.